Well, thanks for sharing your garden with us. And right now we're going to turn our attention to Texas trees. And I'm joined by Jared Pyka from Native Texas Nursery. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Good, good. Well, welcome to Central Texas Gardener. We have one of my favorite topics of all time. I love talking about trees, and you've brought a really interesting selection of mostly small native trees to talk about, right?
Yes, I picked a few things I hope can solve some problems for homeowners here in Central Texas.
Well, and trees are problem solvers, but they're also center points of a landscape, or center pieces, I should say. And we've got a lot of really cool, interesting things here that I think people would enjoy experimenting with in the garden.
Absolutely. I think it helps make a transition from shade trees to your perennials and shorter plants.
Right, right. So kind of they fill in these spaces in the landscape and, as you said, solve some problems. And so let's just dive in and start talking about some of these cool plants. Okay. One is the rough-leaf dogwood. Now, this is a dogwood that is actually native here in Central Texas. And I really like this plant for a lot of different reasons. Why did you choose it?
Well, I like it mainly for a filler. Mm-hmm. It's a great backdrop for some of your other plants. It's deer resistant, which is always good.
Right.
Once established, low water use, although it will tolerate being in poor drainage. Mm-hmm. Wet feet's no problem.
Yeah, and you see them often growing along stream banks, which is a sign that they don't mind occasional flooding, at least.
No, they can handle it.
Right. And this is a plant that gets good fall color, has berries, right?
Yeah,
for
it's great for attracting wildlife. Birds love it. Mm-hmm. Great seed source in the fall.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing that I think of when I think of this plant is erosion control, because they colonize in an area. If you plant one, you're bound to get a few.
That's right. I wouldn't say they're aggressive, but they will colonize. Mm-hmm. Extensive root system, which is great for stabilizing a stream bank or a situation where you're having some washout occurring.
Right. So where do you plant this, in the sun or shade?
I think it belongs at the edge of a tree line, mm-hmm. where it's shaded, but can receive a few hours of sun every day. Mm-hmm. The more sun they get, the more dense they'll become.
More attractive, I think.
More attractive, in my opinion.
Yeah. So rough-leaf dogwood, a cousin to the famous eastern dogwood, which is probably one of those beloved garden trees of the world.
Very historical.
Yeah, but a great little plant for Central Texas. The next one you brought along is one that I don't know much about at all. It's Arroyo sweetwood. And I look at it and I say, that's got to be a Sephora, or it looks like a legume. I don't know anything beyond that.
Yes, well, it is a legume. It is in the same family. It has a few different characteristics, which are interesting. It has a growth habit similar to a Mexican buckeye. It's multi-trunked.
Okay.
It wants to be multi-trunked.
Okay.
The difference being it has a wisteria-like white fragrant bloom in the spring.
Ooh, nice.
It's a combination of cinnamon and vanilla.
Oh,
so very interesting. This plant was brought from South Texas by Lynn Lowry.
Okay.
An introduction in the mid-'80s.
Mm-hmm. When you hear arroyo, you think of, again, streams,
yes,
stream banks.
Rio Grande Watershed.
Uh-huh.
Found along stream banks.
Yeah.
Well-drained soil.
Okay.
And,
it looks like a desert plant.
Loves full sun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So flowers, kind of a medium size, multi-trunk?
Medium to large as far as ornamental trees go.
Okay.
It can grow if you give it room.
Okay. How about deer resistant on this plant?
Well, the plant usually the foliage gets up high enough that the deer don't browse it. But it does have a very thin bark, so there can be some trouble with the deer rubbing the velvet off their antlers.
Okay, so maybe if you're in a hill country setting where that's a problem, fence it while you plant
Maybe fence it or use other plantings around the base to keep the deer away. Maybe agarita would be a good choice.
Okay, good. Yeah, agarita would certainly help with that.
Keep the deer away.
Right. Well, you brought one of my all-time favorites as well, which is the Texas or Mexican persimmon. This is a plant that I love.
Yes, it's great. It's beautiful. It has an interesting shape, exfoliating bark, similar to crepe myrtle, which is very interesting.
Right, smooth, silvery bark when the tree
beautiful.
Matures. Yeah,
a birch would be something similar to the bark. It does produce a fruit on the females. So if you're going to select a Texas persimmon, you might want to look at the nurseries in the fall around August. If you get a female, it may make a little bit of a mess on your sidewalks or your driveway.
Yeah, but the possums and the raccoons eat them.
They'll clean it up.
And again, I like to use this plant for bonsaiing, and whether it's in a big container or a small bonsai pot, and even in the ground, pruning this plant. If you've got that artful eye for pruning, and I like to think I do, I like to think I do. This is one of the most fun plants in the world to prune and work with.
It takes it very well, and actually opening up the interior of the crown really enhances its appeal.
Yeah. You brought along a couple of the sumacs as well. The fragrant sumac is one that I really like the leaf form on, and it gets pretty good fall color too.
It does. It does. It looks like it's on fire in the fall. It's beautiful. Mostly orange, red, yellow. Does have a very interesting leaf shape, different than many other things. Kind of a tri-lobed shape.
Kind of parsley-like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so fragrant sumac, this is I like to think of it as a low-mounding shrub.
Yes, it probably won't get bigger than 6 feet. You can cut it back. It takes well to pruning. The deer will browse it, but they're not going to destroy it.
Yeah, great little plant. And then its cousin is right around the corner, and this is the prairie flameleaf sumac.
That's correct.
And for fall color, this one is really hard to beat.
That's right. This one, when you drive down the hill country roads in the November time frame, it just looks like fire on the side of the road. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and often on my way to Lost Maples, this is the showiest thing out there.
Absolutely. And it's very tolerant of different soils.
Right.
They even grow on the blackland prairie.
And a plant that really is xeric too. I mean, you literally, this is one of those few plants that after the first season, I think you can pretty much just leave it alone.
Good to go.
Right. So prairie flameleaf sumac. One other sumac is the evergreen sumac. And this is one that, as the name implies, will hold its foliage. It has this nice glossy foliage as well. And you like to use this as a screen, right?
Yes. This one takes pruning very well. You can control this one's growth a little bit more. It's a good substitute for maybe where people had planted waxleaf ligustrums in the past.
Yeah.
Get those out of there. Try something native like this evergreen sumac.
Right. Now, they're beautiful plants, often have distinctive forms. This little guy actually has got a pretty cool little form on him himself. I looked at him and think, that's bonsai material. But the plants often will take on nice color as well.
They do. In the fall, after we get our first freeze, it'll get almost a purplish maroon tinge to the leaves. If they don't turn completely, the tips and the margins will turn. It'll hold its leaves mostly through the winter to be pushed out with new leaves in the spring.
Right. Well, it's a beautiful plant. The glossy, attractive foliage really gives it a kind of an edge, I think, in terms of a lot of the other native plant materials. The foliage is not quite so, lustrous looking. But that's a sign that it's xeric in that it's got that kind of waxy coating on the leaves.
Absolutely.
And just a super plant for a lot of different uses. And this one can get pretty big.
It can. This one can get 8 to 10 feet tall if you allow it to grow in its favorite conditions.
Right. Well, real briefly, you brought one other thing, and that is the eaves necklace. So just give me kind of a nutshell on that one. Okay.
It's the same family as a mountain laurel. And this one will have mountain laurel type blooms that are pink in the spring for a very short period.
Very short, right.
The most interesting thing about the eaves necklace is in the fall, the seed pods are a black 2 to 6 inch long necklace, really. And they're beautiful. They rattle in the wind. They're somewhat poisonous, but a ringtail will actually eat them.
Ringtails, okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, if anybody out there has a ringtail, there you go. You've got ringtail food. Well, Jared, it's been a pleasure. We really appreciate you coming on board. Nice selection of small to medium-sized native Texas trees that people can use in their landscapes for all different kinds of purposes.
Absolutely. I made sure I brought some things also that are readily available at local retail nurseries.
Great. Well, we appreciate you doing it. And again, Jared Pyka from Native Texas Nursery, thanks for being on Central Texas Gardener. Coming up next, it's our friend Daphne.